Hey everyone, this is Spacetown again. I'm back after a while. I've been gone for a minute, mostly because it's been very busy for the last half a year, basically. And yeah, I'm back. I'm ready to make videos, ready to talk to everyone about music and making music and all that stuff. And the first thing I want to say about this new year is that I'm coming into it with the intent on making a lot more videos, at least. I have a lot of ideas that I want to put out there, a lot of things that I want to make, and I've been kind of putting off a lot of that work, mostly because, again, I've just been super busy. But now I'm not as busy and I can do these things. So yeah, expect a lot more videos from me. Secondly, a lot of these videos that I want to make are probably going to be about things like the creative process, and how that evolves over time, how it works for me, how I think about my own aesthetic and my own creativity. I realize that those kinds of things don't do super well on YouTube, probably, but, you know, I think that it's super valuable information, and, you know, there are like 7 to 10 different people that can make a video about every new synth that drops, and, you know, Spacetown can't be bought, so yeah, I'm just going to leave it to those people to make those videos, and for me, I'm going to make videos about what I feel like I know the best, which is the creative process and making music over some period of time. And yeah, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully you guys will like it. Hopefully people will join me for this. And yeah, we'll just keep going. I'm going to make a series of videos, and I realize I'm just kind of milking this for content, I guess, but I want to make a series of videos about the creation of my latest release and YouTube video, Obsolescence. Mostly because, again, I don't feel like there is as much stuff out there about how people make things in their minds and how the difference between making something in your mind and actually working with whatever tools you're using to bring it out into the world, there's always going to be some loss of information or some difference of information. And I feel like the creative process is very tied to that interaction, right? Where it's like, how much of your mind's vision is something that you try to bring out into the world, and how much of that is working with these tools and realizing that the tools are putting you into a different direction, and how much do you want to fight that, and how much do you want to just go along with that. And there was kind of a lot of that with this latest release, Obsolescence. So I want to get into, you know, what that was like for me, and why it took so long, what I did over the course of the year. So yeah, and this is going to be the first part in what I think is a series of videos. I think I have about 5 videos planned for this, so it's going to be kind of a long series, but I feel like it's going to be easier for me to make these videos and release them on a regular schedule if I can break the process down a little bit more. So yeah, let's just get into what Obsolescence was. And so this video specifically is going to be about the creative intent of the whole release, what my plan was, and the equipment that I was going to use for this. And you'll probably notice that the creative intent and the plan differs from what was actually released, and so that's kind of what I want to go into in some of the later videos. But kind of at the beginning of last year, 2022, I had these plans for my next Liveset / album release project thing, and I think one of the biggest points that I wanted to hit with the new release, or whatever it was that I wanted to change my sound a little bit. I wanted to change my sound very slightly. In Ghost Obelisks, I was trying to feel out what a live performance and album of this sort would sound like, and what it would feel like for me to make. 2 M8s and a MIDI controller is the kind of thing that seems very minimal. And you know, with what it's like on YouTube these days and synth YouTube and all that stuff, it feels like I felt like I had some sort of pressure to make something that wasn't just 2 M8s and a MIDI controller, right? And I had bought some synthesizers relatively during the year, at least, that I was planning on using. I had a quadrantid swarm that I was planning on using, and I had a Bastel Soft Pop 2 that could have gone in. But the main thing is that I just wanted to change something about my sound and something about the setup. Just because I didn't want to repeat what I did last time. You know, just having every single album release look and sound the same isn't super appealing to me. So the way I wanted to change my sound over the course of this year, and I think I was relatively successful in this, but you know, there are always things that I could have done better. But for my main points for changing my sound was, first, I wanted to think about different kick drum patterns. All of Ghost Obelisks was literally 4 on the floor. I don't think it changed at all. The kick sounds changed, but the patterns didn't. So it was very, very rumbling, very kind of, you know, like, it was very trance-like, didn't really change over the course of that. It didn't really change over the course of the whole album. And, you know, I think that that definitely has its benefits. It kind of puts you closer toward trance. It puts you closer toward, you know, like progressive housey kind of things, and just in the general like sense of the sound, it makes it feel a little bit more deep to me in the sense that you're listening for changes in the sound design of the percussion and not so much changes of the patterns themselves. But like, frankly, over the course of the year in 2021, after I released Ghost Obelisks, I was essentially just like listened to a bunch of different techno. I mentioned Abi Wasabi's set and Boiler Room in Vietnam, and you know, I listened to a bunch of other techno that was really interested in this more like less synthesized sound, a little bit more human sounding instruments and percussion, lots of like hand drums and things that sounded like hand drums and this and that. And they were also very interested in non-4 on the floor patterns, you know, a little bit of syncopation and things like that. So I was just interested in that. It sounded cool. It sounded like a good party. And ultimately, I wanted my music to change a little bit more in that direction. So that was something that I wanted to focus on a little bit for this release. The second thing that I wanted to focus on in terms of changing my sound was just I wanted to sound a little bit less melodic. The melodic part of Ghost Obelisks was a remnant of my past intention to bridge the gap between melodic techno and less melodic techno. My very, very original sounds back to when I tried to call myself parting, more like farting, and you know, all of the original synthesis, the original version of all of this stuff was me trying to bridge a gap or kind of ride a line between melodic techno and more kind of like, you know, dirtier, darker, you know, harder techno sounds. And so some of the melodic stuff in Ghost Obelisks was a remnant of my intention to do that. But now that I kind of have had a chance to like reflect on it and look at it, I just really was drawn to less of the melodic stuff and more of like the deeper and darker and harder sounds. Um, and even when I was writing melodic patterns, they were usually pretty angry and mean. I don't think that that was like a reflection of like what happened over the year or anything. I just was drawn to those sounds a little bit more. And you know, it was melodic patterns that would use like you know half steps really frequently. I would only ever go from like C to C sharp and then like G to G sharp, and those were like the those were the notes I used in a pattern. I wouldn't even bother with anything else that resembled any kind of like real scale. Mostly because it just wasn't interesting to me. I wasn't going in that direction, and all of the techno that I was listening to at the time was in that like deeper, darker direction. So I wanted to kind of see what I could do to push myself to go there. And again, I feel like I was pretty successful, just in terms of like having, in terms of being able to change the sound. I discovered a lot of different tricks with various macro synth patches and things that I made that could get me to those darker sounds more easily. And so I just kept writing and writing, and that's kind of what happened with where that sound went. So a large part of the writing process for this release was pretty much informed by me switching jobs. The first job I was at wasn't super fulfilling, but it was, you know, calm and boring, and it gave me a lot of time to work on writing individual patterns and making things kind of on the side. It was the kind of cadence where it was like every time I got bored or every time I was like drifting off, I would just like write a quick little pattern or do a couple of drum hits and then, you know, go back to my work. And I never had the intention of staying at that position super long term. So switching jobs was always on the table for me, but it didn't happen until the middle of the year. And so most of the writing that I did was in the middle of, or was at the first half of the year, where I ended up with a bunch of different drum patterns, a bunch of different synth patterns, and I ended up with a fairly large amount of material that I could draw from for the set before I even was thinking about recording any of it, which was pretty cool. But then when I switched jobs, it took basically all of my time. I didn't have time to even think about recording any of this stuff, much less how I wanted to structure the arrangements, how I even wanted to film the video. I moved in the middle of it, so that was really busy as well. And so what felt like a lot of momentum leading up to the recording process of this release kind of all went away as soon as I started the second job. And so that was kind of frustrating to me, mostly because I felt like I had a lot of energy and a lot of like ideas about how I wanted to do the set leading up to recording. And then once I got super busy and couldn't do any of that stuff, a large part of the recording process was actually me just like relearning what I wanted, relearning the material that I had written like 5 months ago, and making sure that it was all still sounded good to me and made me feel like I could release it before actually recording it. And so I did have the benefit of playing out this material once and playing it at a show. I'm not going to go into super details in it about it because it was kind of a weird experience, but I was at least able to record that set, and while I was playing it at the time, I had no, there were no monitors there, right? No monitor speakers, so I basically couldn't hear myself the entire time I was playing it. And I could kind of hear what was going on, but it was nothing like, I couldn't dial things in a way that like would be satisfactory to me. So the whole thing was essentially just me picking patterns at random and hoping it would sound okay. And because I was able to record it and you know actually listen back to it afterward, What prevented me from scrapping this entire thing and doing a whole new writing process was after recording it and listening to the material that I had recorded, it sounded pretty good despite the fact that I wasn't able to hear myself, and I was basically, again, just picking patterns at random and throwing them out there, and then, you know, doing a bunch of like filter cutoff changes and things like that. So that gave me a lot of confidence that this was good to record and ready to go. And then around November or so, I kind of started putting together what this whole thing would be. And that's the general timeline of the writing process here. So started in essentially October of, I would say 2021, moved into the first half of 2022, and then I stopped writing entirely around July and August of 2022, then picked it up again around November, and then recorded it in December of last year. So that's kind of the general timeline for the whole thing. So, you know, it wasn't ideal. I probably would have wanted a smoother process leading up to the recording. But I think something that I learned going through this process is that, you know, being able to record things and having an easy way to record yourself, even when you're playing live, is super valuable, because being able to take yourself out of the context of just sitting in your own space and actually writing all of this stuff means that when you listen to things that you were doing in a different context and you're able to then take what you were doing and re-listen to it after, you can kind of take all of the good parts that you did and not have to worry about the fact that, you know, you're listening to it over and over again in your own house and getting all picky about it and getting nervous about it because you've removed yourself from the context or the place in which you were writing and put it into a new context. I think that switching of context is really important for listening to yourself and making sure that you're okay with the music that you've made. And, you know, so much of the creative process for music is literally just turning on the device or opening up your Ableton project or whatever, hitting play on it and being like, yep, it still sounds good. This is still okay for me to work on, and then shutting the whole thing down and you know, waiting another day. So if you're able to do that, but in like a more significant way, play it out a little bit, see how people react to it, whatever, that's a very, very valuable aspect of the writing process. So I would recommend that if possible. If not, you know, just bounce it, take it to your car, all of that stuff, and see what it sounds like there. Now that I've gone over what the creative intent was and what the plan was, let's talk about the equipment that I'm using, or that I used for this. So again, the original intent was to actually use another piece of equipment for this performance because I wanted to change something up about the sound. And so at first, I was probably going to use the quadrantid swarm as an add-on to all of this, to this whole setup. And I wanted that because it kind of takes the sound into a darker and deeper and more dirty direction. And it just like makes really good techno sounds like all the time. Like you turn it on and you can't not make really good techno sounds, right? And so I was really excited to use it. But again, after the writing process stalled in mid 2022, or I mean, yeah, 2022. And then I got an invitation to play a show with, you know, the setup. I had to travel with all of this stuff. And, you know, adding the swarm into the mix was just like a little bit too much for me. It was a little bit too much for me to carry, and I wasn't taking the show super seriously, mostly because it was kind of like an internal company event thing, so I didn't want to like go overboard in terms of preparation and practicing and all of that stuff. I just wanted to go and see what would happen. And so when I took this setup, and this is basically the setup, well, not quite. This was a different MIDI controller, but everything else was exactly the same. And when I took this whole setup up to the Bay from San Diego, I played it out and it actually sounded good. And it made me think I should probably just stick with what's working for me right now. I like the elegance of the setup. It just like aesthetically looks really nice and cool. And I like just like mentally, I like the cleanliness of only having to keep track of the two devices and the MIDI controller to control these. So that's kind of why I ended up back at two M8s. And you know, that's just, sometimes you go in with an intent and it just doesn't work out that way. I had played out with the quadranted swarm before too, so it's not like I had no experience with it. And I even made a video with that device. It just, you know, for some reason, it just didn't fit into what I was doing with this. And you know, that's okay. That doesn't mean I don't like the swarm. I'm probably going to use it for future shows and probably for future videos. It's just that like it just didn't fit for this one. So so yeah, that was cool that it worked out that way. And so the setup for my equipment is pretty much the same as for Ghost Obelisks. Two M8s, right? Two Dirtywave M8s. One central MIDI controller that has 16 knobs that I can use to control both M8s at the same time. And before everyone gets mad at me again, because I still keep getting comments about how I have two M8s or whatever, this was a beta unit. I got this like a really long time ago, I think before it even went on like general release. I've been following the project since it was like an LSDJ / Little Piggy Tracker clone, so you know, don't worry about it. You'll get yours. Just, you know, just chill out. I didn't like pull any strings or anything. Just, it'll be fine. So yeah, two M8s, one MIDI controller controlling both of the M8s. And so that is essentially all of the visible equipment that I was using to make all of the sounds. But I actually have a number of, a couple of like pieces of what I'm calling invisible equipment that you didn't see in the video, but I am using, and they do kind of hold relatively important roles in the whole thing. The first piece was my RetroKits RK006. It's just a MIDI hub and host, so it will take the this MIDI Fighter Twister. The Twister, before I go into the RetroKits, I decided to use the Twister mostly, almost entirely, because it makes cool lights. You can individually color each of these knobs in a different light color, and you know, you can press each of these too. I didn't use that functionality in the video, but if I wanted to, you can do a kind of thing where if you're doing a build-up or something, you can kind of like twist, you know, as the build-up is happening, and then instead of having to bring the whole thing all the way back and use that kind of, use that arm motion, you can just hit the button and it'll reset the MIDI CC value back to where it started. So it would go from 0, and then I twist and it'd go up to wherever it ended up, and then if you just hit the button, it'll go back to 0 again. So that's a relatively useful feature. And you know, with the Twister, you also get the ability to use different banks of encoders. So if for some reason I had more stuff that I wanted to control, you can hit these buttons here and you'll be able to switch banks and have those be different as well. I didn't use any of that. It's almost entirely for visual reasons. And if I were traveling and I needed to, you know, play a show, I would probably still go with the Intech Studio P016 that I've been using in most of my other videos. just because it's small, it's even smaller than this, and it does exactly what I want it to do, which is just be a bank of 16 knobs that I can twist, and that's literally all I need for these M8s. So yeah, MIDI Fighter Twister, no huge reasons for using this instead of the Intech. It just looks cooler than the Intech. So anyway, so yeah, I was talking about the retro kits. So for the retro kits 006, that is a MIDI host and hub. And so that's really important because as I'll explain later on, I was doing some other MIDI processing that wasn't related to just sending CCs from this controller to my M8s. There's another component that I'll go into in a little bit. But it also allows me to translate this device's USB MIDI to the M8s, right? Which is important for any kind of MIDI controller. Normally, if you didn't want to go the RetroKits route or any kind of MIDI host route, then you would just get something like a Fader Fox that supports MIDI via TRS just natively. But because I have these controllers that I like and I have a bunch of other MIDI things that I want to do as well, I got the RetroKits and it's handling a lot of MIDI stuff. It was actually kind of complicated to get set up because not only was I doing stuff with the M8s, I was also doing stuff with a hidden polyend play that I have to go find, so I'm going to do that. Ugh. So before I go over the next piece of gear that I'm using that wasn't pictured, I wanted to kind of mention that one of the other things that I wanted to change from last video to this video, this release, is I wanted to have some sort of visual component, right? And so the visual component ended up being a bunch of lights, like essentially a light show on my desk that would play synchronized to the patterns on that were playing on the M8s, right? But because I only had essentially one M8 channel that was available to send MIDI to whatever was doing the lights, I didn't have any real way to like get everything synchronized. So something that wasn't pictured and something that I was using in the video that you didn't get to see is this, the polyend play. And it's not really used at all for any music. It is entirely because it has 8 tracks of MIDI that I can send, and I used those 8 tracks of MIDI to correspond with the 8 tracks on the M8 and sent those MIDI patterns to the light show that was playing. I'm not going to do a review of this device. Everyone has said everything about it that they want to say. My very, very short thoughts on the polyend play are that I will probably sell it very soon. I keep coming up with ideas that I want to try and use the play for. I get excited about making videos about these like cool ideas that I'm going to use the play for. You know, making techno and making drum and bass and all of that stuff. And then I use this and just all of that energy that I bring into wanting to make those videos just immediately goes away. I don't know what it is about this device that just like totally makes me not want to make music on it. I think it might just be I need to do a lot of work to get things to sound good on here, and it might just be me being unfamiliar with the device. But yeah, I don't make music on it. I don't think I want to make music on it. So I will probably sell this pretty soon. And hopefully whoever buys this doesn't watch this video, so they don't have any idea of what I've just said. So that is that for the play. And the last thing that I used in the video that wasn't pictured was actually the Teenage Engineering TX6, which is what they're calling their field mixer. I know everyone watching this is judging me right now. Yeah, I have one. I sold a bunch of stuff to get it. I know that it is super expensive, and I know what that kind of expense means to a lot of people. This stuff is expensive, and people, you know, have a hard time getting into synthesizers and things like that because of the costs. I think that the redeeming value of the TX6 is that it is just a mixer and it sounds good and it sits there and it works well with both this setup here, my music equipment, and as like a sound card for my computer, or like an external sound card for my computer. So if I need to record anything into it, I can do that easily. I can also take it around and record anything to the to a USB-C drive, which is really, really nice. And I don't think I would have continued on this particular sound or this particular project if I hadn't been able to record with the USB-C, because I took the mixer with me to the Bay Area when I played that show, and I just on a whim decided, oh, maybe I should record this set just to see what it sounds like, so I can listen to it on the way back to San Diego. And, that whole process was the reason I even decided to record what I wrote over the first couple of months of that year. So, I know, yeah, it's expensive. It's a lot. The knobs are unusable. The faders are unusable. But, like, if you look at Stimming's review of it, I kind of generally agree with his assessment of it, which is using it as a performance mixer, like a DJ mixer, is not the way that you want to use that thing. I think the less that you interact with it, the more value it gets. So that's why I'm not even bringing it up here, because it is acting as my sound card for my computer that is also pumping out to the speakers, and it's a whole thing. So I have one, and because I have one, I don't have a bunch of other things that I don't use. So it's a long story, but that, you got the long and short of it there, basically. So that's pretty much the equipment that I used for Obsolescence. Again, two M8s, this MIDI controller, MIDI Fighter Twister, a TX6 that I used to record into, a Polyend Play that was used for MIDI, and a RetroKits RK006 for MIDI stuff. So that's a total device, a total device count of 6. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably put the cost in the video, like on screen, once I like go and figure out what everything costs. I'll put that on the screen so you can see how much this whole thing cost and what it sounds like for the cost. Okay, smash cut, because I ran out of space and had to delete some old videos. I want to be more transparent about costs when it comes to synthesizers, because it's really easy to get caught up in the way that synthesizers sound like. And, there are a bunch of people that make videos, reviewing various synthesizer gear, and it sounds really good, and then you spend $600 to $1,000 buying the thing, and then it doesn't sound good when you buy it. And it's because you are not as experienced as the people that are making the videos. Ren Means Recording goes a little bit more in depth into what this is like, but the short story here is that there is a gap between the sound that you buy and the sound that you bring to the table. And so hopefully by being transparent about what all of this stuff costs, I'll be able to demonstrate what I'm bringing to the table in terms of being a creative person and being someone who has been working with music and making music for decades at this point, and how much how much you're spending on it versus the labor of actually bringing that creativity to the forefront. Creative work is labor. It's work for a reason, and that is something that needs to be highlighted more when it comes to all of these synthesizer reviews and things like that, because it's hard for artists these days. And so hopefully by highlighting the labor that goes into it and how much time and energy it takes to bring out sounds from these devices, as opposed to just throwing a YouTube video at you that talks about that shows you, oh man, look at how cool these devices are, we can move the conversation away a little bit from blind consumerism of these products in the, with the idea that it will just sound good out of the box, and bringing your own creativity to each device, and bringing your own perspective and your own experiences, and having that be the conversation, as opposed to this device is worth this much because it sounds like this, as opposed to, this other device that sounds like this and is worth this much. So that's what I'm hoping to do in 2023. This is going to be the end of the video. I have hopefully gone over the creative intent and the equipment that I'm using for this. My camera's running out of battery, so if I've suddenly started talking faster, that's why. I'm gonna, do the whole typical like, share, subscribe for this video. And if you haven't seen my other video yet, Obsolescence, if you haven't seen that performance or listened to that album, I recommend that you do so. It will give a lot of context for what I'm talking about. So yeah, that's going to be the end of this video. Hopefully it explains something. I'll make a bunch of other videos about the process of making Obsolescence, and hopefully you stick around for those ones too. Thanks for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one.